All right, let's get started. So thank you all for being here today. We're having our second series about lawyers as leaders. We had one in the fall about lawyers as leaders in the public sector. And today, we're going to talk about lawyers as leaders in the private sector. It's a privilege to really gather today for a conversation about what I think is one of the most critical skills. In addition to advocacy, leadership is a skill for lawyers. Disproportionately in our profession, we become leaders. We become general counsels and CEOs and elected officials and judges. We haven't always taught lawyers how to be leaders. And so having these forums is a way to really continue an education about what it's like. Today, lawyers are more than just advocates. They're problem solvers, they're strategists, they're change makers. Whether guiding a company through complex regulations or shaping public policy or standing up for justice, lawyers must lead with vision, integrity, courage, and yes, leadership, which is more than just a title. It's about utilizing our knowledge, our influence, and values to really drive meaningful impact. Today, we're honored to have two outstanding leaders before us. Johnny Taylor, who's the president and CEO of SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management. Natalie Lamarque, who's the executive vice president and general counsel of Principal Financial. Please give both of them a warm welcome. Let's get started. I would love to hear, what inspired each of you to pursue a leadership role in the corporate world, and how did your legal education influence that trajectory?
I'm just excited to hear Johnny's answers. I've been following his career a very long time, so I'm fanning out here. So I think most of you have seen Hamilton, be in the room where it happens. So I grew up as a very nosy child. I was the kid who sat at the top of the stairs to try to hear what the adults were talking about. And in this country, in this day and age, corporations are the root word. And so I always wanted to understand exactly how those decisions were made, who were making those decisions, what were their motivations, and what led me to the path of law into that space was my father, who grew up in Haiti and moved here in the 70s during the Carter brain drain. And he was in law school in Haiti, but he couldn't finish because he spoke out against a dictatorship and then was imprisoned and had to leave law school. And then later on moved to the United States with my mother, who became a physician. And growing up around our table, lawyers were the people that helped change the world around them, right? There was never any space for discussing lawyers in any pejorative light, right? For Haitian immigrants coming to the United States, the legal system is what drew them. And so it was always lauded, right? And we spent our dinner time topics about politics, about civics, about how to engage. And so in my mind's eye, the leaders in our country have always been lawyers, historically. And it just felt very natural to me that you continue on that trajectory into a corporate sector.
Johnny?
Wow, I don't have that interesting of a story. I never grew up wanting to be a leader or a CEO or anything like that. I wanted to be a lawyer. I literally, Perry Mason, those themselves, like I would sit with my grandmother and watch the show, and I was like, I want to be one of those. And when I finally got the right to lead was when I was inside of an organization, and frankly, I was always giving advice and counsel, and then other people would do what they wanted to do. And I was like, I don't like that so much. Even me making the call. Smarter than me. But to be honest, that's what led to it. Seriously, I was like, I'm at least as smart as they are. And they're relying on my advice and counsel to inform their decisions. So then, hell, why don't I make the decision? And that was literally how it happened. I'll tell you, though, related to that, and this is more, I've shared with the group earlier, I come from very modest and humble beginnings. And one of the things that motivates me till this day to be in a leadership role is the responsibility of it. My parents worked for people who were not great leaders. And I remember them coming home and how it impacted them and therefore us and everyone. And I said, gosh, if I could grow up one day and give people good lives and be a leader and an empathetic leader, someone who people knew, yes, I need to get my work done. But you're cheering for me, like you understand my challenges every day, then I want to be that guy. So that literally is, so on a personal note, I was motivated by watching my parents be poorly led, if not led at all, at work. And then the other thing was I just wanted to make decisions. I was like, I'm tasting of it all.
You talk about being in a room where it happens, and that's so interesting, right? As a leader, we always want to be kind of in that room. But what moments maybe or experiences really shaped the leader who you are to be effective in that room? And how did law school play a role?
Gosh, I'm being directed. I love it. Everywhere I go, a 14-year-old daughter, being directed. Yes, I'm fine. Yes, ma'am. That I can actually, I hadn't thought about this, but this one moment, I was Viacom, the company that I worked with, I worked for 7.5 years earlier in my career. Actually started at Blockbuster and then we were acquired by Viacom. And so I was at the, I was called in. They said, we're doing a deal. I just shared the story with you. And I'm at Paramount Pictures. I'm in one of the divisions of Viacom. And they said, we're buying a company and we need to bring you up to New York, the parent company, to help us on this deal. And I'm like, well, why do you want me to work on this deal? Well, get ready, we were buying BET. And so they need a black lawyer on the deal, I guess. And it's okay. I'm okay with it. I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything. Let me laugh, it's okay. So they asked me to work on this deal. And I came up to New York and I was really involved in the deal. And we ultimately consummated the deal, closed BET, and it's still one of the few, although Viacom no longer exists and Paramount Pictures no longer exists, and Paramount as we know it is now Paramount Global. That acquisition, I will tell you, really served as that moment when I realized I'm onto something, because I was going to be able to help these two folks come together. I kind of felt like a matchmaker. And hey, back there, how are you? And I'm seeing you like, this is your life, Johnny, too. And you're seeing people you haven't seen in a long time. I saw my classmate over here. Hey, it was so wonderful. Okay, back to the question. And so that was the moment. I mean, I literally remember that moment sitting in the room saying, gosh, I've made it. I shared with you, neither of my parents finished high school, forget college. And so the idea that I was in this room and people were transacting a multi-billion-dollar deal, and they were looking at this little boy to give them advice and counsel about how to do it, and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure we have regulatory approvals, et cetera. I realized that day, gosh, this is pretty darn cool. Now you get to do it every day,
Yes,
right?
yes, I do. You guys can hear me okay from here, right? So I'm gonna, and she said no?
Right.
Oh. Sorry. How's that? Is that better? Okay. So I'm gonna embarrass someone in the room. So one of my former colleagues from the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office, is here in the back, Dan Chung. And
who flew in from Washington,
D.C.
And Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher.
That's right. He's my amazing husband as well. But
all right,
so the experience, the leadership experience that really, one of many that shaped me was probably day 3 at SDNY. And if you've read about it in the news, it's one of those offices where you just get thrown into the deep end. There is no training, there is no hand holding. You walk into a room and the next day you're in court arguing motions and you have no idea what you're doing, right? Literally, no one tells you anything. But I remember meeting Dan probably day, I don't know, very, very early on in my career. And we immediately hit it off. And the way in which we supported one another throughout our careers, we ended up being office, next door to each other in offices. We tried cases together. We prosecuted cases together. And what I felt in that environment was just kinship, right? And let me be clear, it was a very challenging environment, especially for me as the only Black woman in the criminal division the entire 7.5 years I was there. So it was a very lonely experience as well. But But people like Dan really reaching out and seeing me in my humanity in those moments meant a lot. And so I think that has always shaped the way I try to approach my team, many of whom are in the room. Thank you for coming. Shape my colleagues, right? Because I think no matter how good you are, smart you are, hard you work, in those moments where you feel isolated or alone, it is hard to perform. It is hard to perform your best under those conditions. And you talk about that so much in a lot of the work you do. And having a human who you look up to, the way I look up to Dan, he's one of the smartest attorneys I've interacted with, stop for a moment and say, do you need help? Really pivoted my mentality because it was, SDNY is an incredibly competitive environment. It is not an environment where everyone's necessarily lending a hand, right? And so he stuck out to me in that moment. And he just made me remember that's what it's about. And it's just wonderful, it's a full circle moment.
Many of the people in this room are going to be future advocates, future leaders. They're going to follow in many of your footsteps. When you think about the corporate world, what are some of the unique traits that law students and young professionals need to learn to do leadership in that space?
This trait. I'll say one, you say one.
That's okay.
Because she keeps making me answer. You should go first. You go first.
All right. Especially for lawyers, humility.
That's my number one. You took mine.
So, and I say this because I'm going to say something arrogant now. When a lawyer walks into the room, you raise the collective IQ in any corporate room you walk in significantly, period. The only other people are like the actuaries.
Right.
But like other than them, you are raising the IQ. You think faster, you analyze systematically. So if you don't acknowledge that, but then throw it in the garbage and not need to show how smart you are, not need to show your math, not need to prove to everybody that you understood every nook and cranny of the issue and regulation, and you lead with humility, I mean, the reaction is amazing because then you create comfort, then you create openness, and your business partners, Raji's a great example of someone who moved over to the business space from the legal space. They welcome you in the room. They ask for you. So without that grounding of humility, it is a hard road to hoe in a corporate environment.
Since you took my humility, I will tell you, second and probably really close to that is empathy. Because you are, frankly, the smartest person in the room, and oftentimes, and even if you aren't, they think you are just because you're a lawyer. It's the deal. There's only two real professionals, doctors and lawyers. A lot of people's minds, the doctor's genius, the lawyer's genius. But you have to practice with empathy. I tell a story, and I'll just say, I was maybe a second year associate in a big firm and coming out of law school. And I had back then a secretary who did my faxes and got my briefs all typed up, the story. And I'll never forget because I'm embarrassed by this story, but I'm going to be transparent to tell you what happened. She had a kid. My brief was due, and if you remember back in the day in the courts, like it had to have a blue cover sheet, happily, or whatever this stuff. I forgot more than I know. And this kind of font and all of this stuff. So I'm obsessing about getting this brief in on time. It is a bet the company case. Provident Life and Accident Insurance Company was our client. I'll never forget a quitem action. And so I'm working on it, getting in line, and it's about 4:45. The brief is to be sent out by courier at 5. She comes into my office and said, I have to pick up my kid. I looked at her and I said, that's your problem. That's literally what I looked at. I said, that's your problem, not my problem. Your kid's not my problem. This brief is my problem. And I'm a young associate. I'm trying to stop. Professor Charlotte, and I love her. And she just like, I had none. I was so self-absorbed and focused in the moment. I needed to get my stuff done and I was earning my reputation and I wanted to build my 2,600 hours and it was all about me. And I did not understand that this single mother's, now I've sort of forced her to not make a decision between her child and my work. And I reflect now on all of the other things I could have done. Hell, I could have asked someone else on the floor to do the work. And I could have said, hey, to another assistant, could you go get her son from school? There's a gazillion things now that we didn't have Uber back then, people, so I couldn't, they're not things I could have done. But I reflected, I literally did not care in that moment about anything but me and my interests. And I gotta tell you, it has forever changed my practice. Because listen, lawyers can be kind of harsh. You know, we deal with some tough situations and we work our way. She's back there as the husband said, I know. I saw that. I live with one. But you really have to, in your practice, if you want a lesson in leadership, it is empathetic leadership. And according to SHRM research, increasingly employees are saying it is the number one trait I want from my manager is empathy. Not to be confused or conflated with sympathy. Sympathy plays a role too, but empathy is a really important leadership skill that I've developed over time. And I'm still working on it because I'm not naturally an empath. I'm so competitive and I want to win until I'm not built to care about your problems. I don't want bad things to happen to you, but I want really good things to happen to me. And so it's just a different way of thinking about it. I'm being transparent, but I'm so mindful of it at all times and intentional. And I would encourage all of you, especially the young people in the room, don't let that get in the way because I'm not proud of that person.
You know, your words resonate with me. And I've had an opportunity to be around some fantastic leaders. I think about our president who's in the audience, Marty Martin, who leads with such courage. I was around Senator Dianne Feinstein, who has so much tenacity. But your words really resonate with me. I was talking about Senator Cory Booker, who I worked with, who had so much empathy. But I always say he was the smartest person in the room without being the smartest person in the room. That sense of humility. In addition to humility, in addition to empathy, what about ethical decision making? What role does ethics play? You know, you have a fast changing world in the corporate environment, oftentimes driven maybe by the bottom line and by profits. How do you lead with a sense of an ethical compass in a world that oftentimes the business and the profits are also a motivating factor?
I'll start, sure. So, first and foremost, there is no compromise on ethics, period, ever, under any circumstances. So there's a huge difference between approaching issues from a risk-based perspective and compromising on your ethics. And early on in your career, you might get those two conflated. Don't. When you are about to cross the line on your ethics, your gut tells you so loud, you have no question in your mind that moment is existing. Now, risk-based approach is what we do every single day, all day. It's what you do all day in your lives. It's what we do as parents. It's what we do as human beings living in this society. So I would say first and foremost is you don't compromise. I would say second is you work for companies that have ethical records, right? Vote with your feet. If you, as some of the nation's brightest, right, make decisions that ethics matters to you in corporate America, then you hold corporate entities to that standard. Don't work for ones that you feel are compromised in that manner. And don't be dogmatic about how you make those assessments. Make those assessments as you would against yourself, right? Hold yourself to the same standard you're holding that company. It's not perfection. You don't hold yourself to that standard, but don't work for companies that are unethical. And the last piece I will say is, I get the privilege of leading the legal compliance and government relations team at Principal of about 420 professionals worldwide. And
give it up. No, we gotta celebrate.
that wasn't a brag. Those folks, right, prove to me every single day that being ethical is good business. Why do I say that? What does my company do? Make long dated promises, right? You entrust us with your retirement money, how you are going to feed yourself at the end of your life. right? You entrust us with your benefit decisions. Now, why would you do that if you deemed the organization unethical? From a business perspective, for our profitability and our bottom line, ethical behavior and leadership is critical to us actually being profitable. So I completely reject the notion that one is antithetical to the other. I reject that wholeheartedly. And some people will say, well, that's Pollyanna of you looking at what's happening in the world. And I will say every single day as lawyers, wherever you all end up, you will be able to make decisions on a day-to-day basis that change the course of what your company does. Hold your company to account.
And I would just add just a little, because I couldn't say that better, but I will say I've worked around enough people where individuals have ethical lapses. None of us is perfect. And you can get real close to the line and unfortunately slip over. Hopefully you don't, but there are consequences to that. But what I found when I was a general counsel is when I saw someone who was predisposed to walk real close to the line, I actually thought it was my responsibility to pull them aside and say, let me tell you what I'm seeing. You may not even be aware of how close you are. And I tell them, you know, this is a slippery slope. One day that you're going to fall into it and there will be serious consequences. So as I'm one of those people who's made enough mistakes, not ethical, it's pretty clear, but I've made enough mistakes in my life not to judge people too harshly. You don't know their individual circumstance. You just don't know enough about them. And I've seen it. The person who I had an employee of ours who stole. Literally stole from us. And it was easy and like totally unacceptable. But I called the guy in, and this goes back to him. And I said, what made you do that? I didn't start with, let me catch you, my lawyering. So what did you do with this day? So I'm gonna box him into a corner. Hell, I knew he stole. So there was no question. My question was, I really wanted to understand why. And when I got into the why, I realized this guy had adopted 2 children. And his wife had lost her job. And he simply could not afford to. Now, no justification for stealing my company's money. But it's amazing how when you talk to people and understand the worlds that they are trying to navigate, that you can become a little bit less judgmental. Now, so we didn't fire him. We pulled him out of a role where he would have the ability to steal from us. And we told him we're gonna pay his damn money back. And we made him own up and we had to file with the government to say that. But I just will say, I don't know that it's always a black and white line because people are human and they make mistakes. People, it's like I was just having to debate this about sexual harassment in the workplace. We had someone who engaged a leader in sexual harassment in the workplace about 10 years ago. And so we were the employer, it wasn't SHRM, was considering hiring. So they called us and said, would you hire this person? I said, well, that's not my call. But what I will tell you is if we believe in second chances, we believe in second chances. You're willing to give second chances to someone who's committed a crime and gone to prison, but you're unwilling to give a second chance to someone who engaged in sexual harassment. You can't, life doesn't work that way. So sometimes you have to keep people honest as well about ethical behavior. If all of us are going to be judged by that one mistake that we made for the rest of our lives, then get ready. Get ready. So you got to be really, I'll never hire that person again. Well, what the hell are they supposed to do? If they made that mistake at 30, never work again because they had a lapse of judgment. So now there's some things that cross the line. So I'm not disagreeing at all, but I am saying be a lot more understanding because we can start judging real harshly. And I think you've got to have that humanity in your practice as well as lawyers. People will make mistakes.
I love that because many of our folks in the audience may be future prosecutors, for example, standing in judgment people. They may be future judges. I always think about when I was a prosecutor, the words, one of my heroes, a lawyer in Alabama, Brian Stevenson, said, we all are better than the worst thing we've ever done, right? Let's talk about challenges. People will see you all and see your resumes and think, these folks are superhuman, right? They've done all these amazing things in their life, right? But all of us at some point have failed. I know as an athlete, I probably learned more from failure than I learned from success. Tell me about maybe a time in the corporate space as a leader that you failed and what you learned from it.
So, 2020 is when the world shuts down, right? March of 2020. And that's when I became general counsel of another life insurance company. And got that role in New York City. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. New York City completely shut down. At the same time as we're dealing with a public health crisis, my children are now home, right? Educating themselves remotely. And I say educating themselves remotely. I have a new C-suite job that I've been in for 6 seconds. And I work for a life insurance company in a global pandemic. So I'm working 16, 17, 18 hours a day. And I'm not seeing like light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't look like there's any space for this to change or ameliorate or get better. And, you know, I succumb in that moment to just being overwhelmed and not calling friends, not reaching out. And I wasn't showing up the right way for my children. I wasn't showing up the right way for my husband, and I knew it. And to me, the failure was I didn't stop and ask for help. I didn't stop and take a beat. And I fell down, you know, as a mom, right? I sacrificed the time I would have spent with my kids. I wasn't falling down as a general counsel. I was showing up for every meeting. I was reading every brief. I was prepared to talk about all kinds of issues. And that was a failure, right? Because that's not what God put me on this earth to do. It's just not. And it took a long time for me to be okay with, I'm obviously not going to be perfect in every aspect of my life at all times, but in a time where the world was shutting down and everybody was terrified, my priority should have been my family and their mental health and well-being, and not my job. But because I had just gotten a leadership role and I did not want to fail at that, I sacrificed something else I should not have sacrificed in that moment.
So mine is the biggie. And I didn't talk about it until probably the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, because I had to get over it, right? I was going through a divorce in 2002. It was the first time in my life that I had actually failed at something. And if anyone who's going through a divorce, it's really tough. You can be mad at the person, mad at yourself. A whole bunch of things are happening. So loved her a lot, but the marriage wasn't working and it wasn't going to work. And I tried to work through it. And this is where I make a big pitch for mental health for lawyers and mental well-being. We're solving everyone's problems and we don't sometimes, well, oftentimes take care of ourselves. And so I'm general counsel of a big global company in the UK, Compass Group, 408,000 employees, operating in 200 countries. And I have a law department, risk management function, et cetera. Pretty big deal, except I couldn't do both. And I was crumbling. I literally was crumbling. But I decided that I was going to continue, I was going to work my way through it. I've never had a drink of alcohol, never tried a drug, never tried a cigarette. So I had no outlets. I was just struggling through this. And my vice was going to be work. And I reached near brownout and I approved a contract that was supposed to be $1 million or $100 million as general counsel of this company. And sadly, the other side decided to hold us accountable. So my then CEO called me in, and several expletives later, and all sorts of WTF, da 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 da. The first thing I had to do was own it. And then secondly, I quit on the spot. And I think it shocked him so much. I said, no, I did it. I'm like, I am tired and I cannot continue to do it. And by the way, you're probably gonna find 3 more of these somewhere. I mean, I'm that makes you feel better. I can laugh about it now. It's not me with that good check. I don't make good money. And so you can laugh now, but it was humiliating, it was degrading, it was embarrassing, it was everything. So I layered on top of a divorce. Now this I'm failing at work. So I deemed myself a 100% failure, someone who had literally, and I quit. That was my mistake, because the CEO said to me, I believe in you. You've made this mistake. People have made mistakes. We're going to have to get through this. I actually think you're a decent litigator, so you'll get us out of this. But you can't leave me now. And I quit. I refused to do it. I stepped away from the practice. I just said, I got to take care of me. And I'm also too embarrassed to walk back into that board meeting and see my colleagues every day who think I'm a super lawyer. And I've proven that I'm not. So it was really a bad failure. I left and tried to make the marriage work, and ultimately didn't work. So I failed at everything. I quit everything, life and the job. And then I had to rebuild my life and my career. So that's what happened.
Well, thank you for sharing that. The world is changing. You see changes all around, changes on the global landscape, changes domestically. In corporations, oftentimes, you've got to deal with really fast-paced issues on a global scale. And the external world around you impacts how you also operate. How do you deal with those changes? You're a leader, and things are changing all around you. How do you respond? How do you lead? And how do you lean into your values in a responding world, in a changing world?
So love that question, because we're in the middle of it now. You can imagine being, we're a month into the new presidency, and the executive orders are flowing out by the moment, and many of them directly impact what we at SHRM do. Executive orders.
I have watched many of them.
Many of these, right? From DE&I to return to office to mass firings, you name it, every day it's coming at us. And it can be overwhelming. In fact, it is really overwhelming, not only for my team, because they're working around the clock and our members need to know, what do I do given this newest pronouncement from the government? And so that part is happening. And at the same time, they're looking to me for leadership. The only thing I'll tell you is real simple advice. I had the good fortune of interviewing George Bush, former President Bush, at a conference 2 years ago, fireside chat. And I asked him, I said, it's a very similar question. And he said, I'm going to take you back to 9/11. And he said 2 words stuck in my head for everybody. What do you talk about the world changing, and you're at the apex, right? To use the term just recently, the court used. He said, project calm. 2 words. That is your job as a leader. Like what's happening, you must project calm. He described it. I'm sitting here in this elementary school. Y'all remember the moment when he got the news? And he said, the last thing I needed to do was freak out. My people needed, the United States needed, in fact, the world needed us, and me in particular, to project calm. That would be my advice.
I'll take that question in a little bit of a different direction as to why lawyers are so damn good at times of change. So everything you learn in law school is the ability to digest like copious amounts of information, right? You could inhale it. Then you can dig deep into whatever little nugget of that area of like the mountain that you're looking at. You're taught to prioritize and sequence as you're reading cases. You're taught to understand what is the most significant issue of the case, what's the secondary issue of the case, what order would you have to answer the questions in order to get to, right, the analysis that's appropriate. You're taught to be a strong and good communicator, whether it's writing it or orally communicating it. And ultimately, you're taught to be persuasive. You're taught to be observant, right? And we're both trial lawyers and read people. In times of change, especially in corporate America, those are the skills that everyone around you is going to lean on you for, coupled with the calm point and the level-headedness and the unbiased, right, perspective on all that information. But your ability to organize and digest when there are multiple things happening for your business leaders and business partners, help them focus on what is the most important thing for you to focus on, what's the second most important thing. Don't stop. You don't need to worry about any of that. I have it. You focus on number 1, you focus on number 2. I will do the math, I will do the homework. Go. The ability to do that at a time of change is the ball game. And, you know, that is what I love when I see my lawyers do. They kill the noise. They kill the mayhem. and they just laser focus, and they're that calm shoulder, like their calm hand on their business partner's shoulder. And you never get credit for that. No one's gonna pat you on the back for it.
It's your job.
But watching your business partner knock it out of the park is the payment, right, for us. So I would say you have the skills to deal with these moments in a way that the other colleagues you have around the table may not.
And to that point, if you do it well enough, they'll get credit, but you may be pulled up. You
Yes.
may be given the business opportunity. If people see you, all of that, calm. I mean, during leadership, when things are going crazy, you'd be surprised. Everyone's looking to you. They really are looking for you. So when I say project calm, it doesn't mean you're calm. It means you gotta project calm. And people are looking for leadership. Leaders step up, and then it's amazing how you then all of a sudden are you're brought in, as you said, you're a trusted advisor. And at some point, they bring you up. They say, hey, I'd love you to do this. And back to my quick story. So when I forgave myself, I took a year off. I just had to literally get it together. You get counseling, you do all of those things. And it wasn't like I did anything wrong. It just marriage that didn't work out. I just let everything go sideways on me. And then you come back into the game. You say, Coach, put me back in. And that's when the story ends well. I mean, there's no one cares about what's that movie, is it Blind Side or whatever the story, like if the guy had made it, no one would care. It wouldn't be a movie. Like people need to see you win on the other side of it. And don't forget that, right? You gotta win. And so I really mean that. That's that part of that. And you've gotta buy into that. But as lawyers, you're built for this. You literally are. When we talk about, because they like the long nights that we had and preparing for, oh gosh, I can see the professor over there saying, yeah, you are built for this level of just hard work, and you bore through it and you make it.
I love this. I love that notion of coach put me back in the game. Because again, as an athlete, I always felt like I failed more than I achieved. Even in my career, you look at a resume, you see your successes. You don't see the jobs we didn't get. You don't see the failures we had along the way, which may tell you more about us than the things that we achieved. All of us are kind of this, we grew up in this almost post-civil rights. This time in American history where my father marches home, right? We have all these gains, getting people like us in the workforce, getting women, LGBT and others. We're now at a time where diversity itself is on trial. What role, why is diversity important, if it is important, in terms of leadership in the corporate sector? And if it is important, what strategies do you employ to navigate and lead teams in today's world?
So the most important thing is not to let other people define a term that you know the definition of. Okay. It has an objective definition. There is a Webster's dictionary that we can open up right now, and there's definitions out there. And it means different, varied, right? You cannot tell me there's a leadership team, a board, a group of directors that say we want the same perspective, people, outlooks, right? Subject matter expertise, experiences, backgrounds, understanding, because that leadership team will fail. Because the issues that you're digesting are diverse, right? So I think that there's a lot of cultural shift that's happening in our country right now, but I don't believe that diversity is something that we can give up and continue to be profitable in corporate America. So why is it important as a leader? Because we all need to be around people who are seeing our blind spots. We all need to be around people who have different subject matter expertise than us, different lived experiences, because they're going to see different aspects of a problem or an issue. We need people with different communication styles. We need people that are introverts and extroverts. We need people that bring their entire selves to the problem. And if folks don't feel included, they cannot give you their best work. So to me, it's a lot of conversation that misses the actual point, right? And I sit with our board, sat with my prior board, and I've sat with other boards. And those are the people around the country that are making decisions really around corporate America. And I have yet to meet a director of a board that is on a profitable, healthy company that wants sameness around them when it comes to leadership or when it comes to colleagues.
Double click. I think though that what we have done is, first of all, let me just start with where I land with all, what we tell our membership every day. It's about the work, not the words. And I think we have allowed ourselves to get dragged down into a debate around what we call it. First of all, I think there's no debate about the word diversity. I'm not so sure there's a big debate around inclusion because our country has really evolved. The debate is on the E. The equity has, in part because it's not so clear if you talk to people in this country what is meant. The equity can mean equal outcome or it can mean equal opportunity. Depends upon, so there's no clarity around that. And again, I have 340,000 HR people, and you put them in the room and you're going to get 200,000 different definitions of what the E means in practice and in how it's so defined. So that has created. Secondly, and I think it's really important for us to focus on it. The United States, generally speaking, at least in an employment law context, does not really make room for equity. Employment law, okay? We have an Equal Pay Act. We don't have a Pay Equity Act. There are countries that do have a Pay Equity Act, but it's not the United States of America. Our legislation is called Equal Pay Act. We've decided to read into it equity. And when we talk about compensation, and it came a lot out of Me Too and then George Floyd, and before that, Rodney King, people were like, oh, this is so new. I was like, no, it's not new. We've been at this for a while. We've seen this. I'm an optimist, and I think we're a really important point in our country where we're actually going to have a conversation about this. Very smart, thoughtful people are going to visit this and say, you can't say we're about inclusion when what inclusion is for is only some people. It has to be inclusion for everyone. We cannot commit to diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives that say you win and you lose. And on its face, you win. First of all, I don't think we have a legal construct that protects for that. The Ames case that was just argued a couple of days in Washington, D.C., before the U.S. Supreme Court, is almost you saw unanimous agreement amongst the judges that Ames is likely to be reversed. And that case is going to go away, right? Or at least the way some of the circuits, there's a split in the circuits, and thus the U.S. Supreme Court tackled the case. I say all of that to say, I think the optimist in me says, on the other side of this, we're going to be in a much better place when it comes to this work. We at SHRM talk about inclusion and diversity because the equity will work out, and there are organizations that do that. But in the workplace, if we could get the diversity right and the inclusion right, we're going to make some major progress. The world is better for people who look like me than it was 50, 70 years ago. And anyone who doesn't want to own that has their head in the sand. It's not true. We are a better, the experience of African Americans in particular, by the way, diversity is broader than just African Americans. Someone told me the other day, tongue in cheek, that it's not just BEI, Black Equity and Inclusion, it's DEI. And yes, that doesn't mean you don't focus on issues of race, but it is far broader. I mean, think about the 2023 case, the Harvard case in higher education. That wasn't white people complaining about Black people taking their seats, preferential treatment. That was Asians. So you had two people of color saying this doesn't work. You're defining equity in a way that disadvantages my community. So this is happening. This is not as clean as the binary world that we grew up in. When you were Black or you were white, you were straight or you were gay, you were older, you were young, you were Democrat or you were Republican. We don't live. The diversity construct that a lot of people are living in was built for a very binary America. That doesn't exist anymore. So I, for one, am very excited that people are, maybe that's the lawyer in me. I'm excited that people are challenging this. There's nothing wrong with challenging ideas, even if you don't use language that I like. On the other side of this, if we challenge the ideas and we get to a better place, then it was worth it was the sausage making. So maybe people don't see it there, but I'm actually okay with where we are right now. I think we're in the early stages of the game, first quarter. I'm a basketball fanatic. Was married to a WNBA player, by the way. I still like her. She kind of likes me. We're good. But it's first quarter. It is first quarter, and I am very much optimistic that this whole thing, this diversity thing, is going to be sorted. I said this to the earlier group. Before you say, oh, these executive orders are horrible, the spirit of them might be horrible, but read them. They had really smart lawyers who drafted this thing. Don't think for a second that they just threw it out there. I was in Trump 1, the first executive order that he issued toward the end of, if you go look at it, that was the one we knew was going to be under legal attack because he was leaving and he knew the new president was going to throw it out anyway. But these executive orders are written with a plan, perhaps dark, but a plan. And what we have to do is be smart. This is the time to be very smart. Take the emotions out of it. We talk about getting too emotional, the activists are jumping on it. Step back and just say, this is an opportunity for us to do diversity for the 21st century. And finally, I just have to make this comment. It's amazing to me that everyone is interested in diversity as long as they agree with it. Hello? And we lawyers have to keep people honest. You know, I want diversity as an African American, but not for those trans people. Really? I thought you said you're committed to diversity. No, it's actually just the diversity I agree with. We've got to start holding each other accountable for it, because I don't think people are really committed to diversity. They're committed to diversity that they like and or agree with. If our country is going to be all that it can be, we've got to really commit to diversity in its broadest sense. I'm optimistic when we land there.
Just one point before you jump. I think the part that we all have to hold ourselves accountable to is understanding our history. And so the extent to which the conversation is bifurcated away from deep, I'm a history major, African American history major from Duke, not Drake, sorry.
She's fine, we'll
yes.
take her.
But I think having a fulsome conversation in the context and the light of our history is good.
I want everyone in the audience to get your questions ready, because we're going to turn to you in a second. Last question before we go to the audience. I'm going to do a twofer. One, not just looking at contemporary issues, but if you look at the leadership context in a corporate sphere, what are the emerging challenges in the future that leaders need to be prepared for? And secondly, what advice would you give to law students in the room who want to be leaders in the corporate sphere?
Real easy. The second one is practice and work very intentionally on your empathy. I've already shared that with you. I would say that the big issue that we're confronting, I'm actually working on a book now called Displacement. Where did all the human beings go? That's the working title. We're a really interesting point. Technology is going to displace folks' jobs. And we can put our heads in the sand if we want, but it is a real issue. It's a societal issue. What do those people do? You know, of course, universal basic income, like what are the responses to it? But any of us who do not fully appreciate what's about to happen with AI and the other emerging technologies, we've seen nothing yet. ChatGPT is barely 2 years old, right? November 29th, 2022 was the introduction, maybe the 30th, one of those 2 days. But the point is, this is all new. And when it really, you talk about generative AI, and then there's AGI, I mean, this gets really deep quickly, and how it's going to impact people's lives and their livelihoods is profound. So that, I believe, is going to be the biggest issue. How as a society do we deal with people who are ready, willing, and able to work, but there are no jobs for them to do?
And if you haven't read or watched him on YouTube talking about this, you should. I have. He's prolific in this space. When it comes to lawyers also, right, specifically to the folks in the room, we have got to start to understand that when you think about what first and second and third year associates do on a day-to-day basis, that is now done with a very well-written prompt, right? I mean, prompt engineers is a thing for a reason, right? So as you all are thinking about how do I embrace this profession? What should be my mindset as I enter my career? I really do encourage you to understand your job is not to gather and regurgitate. Your job is to analyze and provide your judgment. So what does that actually mean? And I'll tie it back to the corporate America point. We can have ChatGPT throw together a decent legal memo telling me what the thing and what's the what of where and how. What it can't do yet is take all of my organization's, the understanding, deep understanding of my organization, its history, what it's done, what it wants to do, the strategy in the future, and then give me an answer that imbues that 360 perspective of my organization on that specific legal, compliance, regulatory, ethical, or government relations issue. It can't do that yet. And I safely say I don't think it will ever be able to do that the way your brains can do that. So what does that mean for you? It means you're going to have to study how to enable yourself. Because I believe AI is an enabler. I don't believe it's a replacer. And I'm going to steal your line, right? AI is not going to take your job. What was your line?
Someone who's proficient in AI will take your job.
And it applies to lawyers too. That applies to lawyers too. So what does that mean? How do I tie together being proficient in AI and succeeding in corporate America? Well, it's obviously you understand enough about the law. So when that AI generated memo spits out, you look at it and you're like, that's all wrong, right? Like it messed up, it hallucinated. You're able to quality control it. But then you have a deep understanding of your business. You have a deep understanding of your industry and other industries. You are a voracious reader, so you can analyze the legal issue in the context of where you think your industry is going in 5 years, not where it is today. That's what you all are going to have to do. And the good news is that can't be replaced. The bad news is we had like 6 years of writing those little easy memos to sort of like, glide into our careers. And you're going to have to come in hot. You're going to have to come in more ready and prepared to give us judgment and analysis earlier in your career than I think we had to. But you are prepared to do that.
You remember document production?
All the time.
They put a ton of us in a room and we made a lot of money to do it, but you're sitting in analyzing documents and everything. But you don't need that. Like you look and say, gosh, that was so in the 1940s almost. I mean, it was so old. And now just the machine learning and the machine work, those of us who are old enough to know, like your job is very different. The associate today is going to have a very different job than the associate of our, of our era, but it's going to continue to change. But I think, yes, from a lawyering standpoint, I think I gave this little line that we use at SHRM, which is AI plus HI, human intelligence, will equal the new ROI.
Nice.
And so we, thank you. I did it at ASU and everybody kind of liked it. I was like, okay. That's as much math as I know. But it's that concept of, it's not a multiplier. We actually, because if it's a zero anywhere you go, but we can actually add additive and make for a very positive future in the law.
Questions from the audience? Raise your hand, I'll call on you. Question here, and say your name and either your company or your year in law school.
Okay, thanks for thank you both for being here. I'm Lloyd Gates. I'm a 1L from Chicago. I have a question. I admire how you both recognize your team, and being in leadership team is so kind of crucial to what you do. So I want to know, how do you maintain a solid team around you, and then also how do you recruit others who you think would be a good complement to your team?
Oh, that's yours. Come on.
He literally runs an organization that teaches people how to do this.
Did she say she has 400 people in her shop?
So this is, and because I really know say, but first and foremost, it's keeping people around you that are smarter than you. Period. Right? You want to hire the best, you want to keep the best. And if you are someone who approaches your job like you want to give it away, you'll have a wicked team. But nobody wants to work for that person who's like, right? Everybody wants to work for that person who wants to delegate away their job. And then that's how you get the next job. Because you can't get the next job until you've delegated away your job.
I've just had cultural clarity. On my teams, there's a phrase that I use a lot. When people come into our shop, even at the interview stage, I am really clear. Like, I don't test them on their competency. My HR team has done that. I sit down and I spend time telling them what it means to work here. This is who we are. And your job is to determine whether or not you are aligned with us. That doesn't mean you always agree with us, but that you are aligned with this culture in the context of diversity. We don't have a chief diversity officer at Sherm, but we're one of the most diverse companies in America. And it's because they understand in the door, we say we value diversity. We think our diversity is our strength. I'm not going to prescribe to you how many people you have to hire, who you have to interview, but I don't have the energy for that. Smart people figure it out. The boss says they value diversity, look around and make sure your team's diverse. And in some ways that are visible and ways that are not so visible, because a lot of our dimensions of diversity are not visible to people. So again, this broadest sense of diversity. So I don't want to get off into the diversity thing, other than to say, you tell people what your culture is, and people who are not aligned with your culture, then you take them out. Now that sounds really rough, but I'm sorry from the HR guy. That's not what it was. But seriously, because I'm telling you, one bad apple, spoil it. We've all seen it time and time again. That person was not ethical. That person who doesn't value women, that person who is not appropriately empathetic. You have to say, listen, this is who we are. And I'll give you just a quick example. We at Sherm have a line that is, we're about policy, not politics. That's just a tagline of ours. And it's hard sometimes because we all have our political affiliation and our bent. But at the end of the day, everyone that we hire, we say, listen, sometimes we're going to walk into the Biden administration. Sometimes we're going to walk into the Trump administration. They're going to make policy decisions with us there or not. So you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm not going to go talk to someone who is, by the way, that's called diversity, right? So when I did that, we had a couple of people in our comms team who said, I just can't get with that. I can't believe you would even give him any time. I said, well, you can't work here. That's not our culture. Your job, and I went back to, I keep putting in your Charlotte on the spot, but like this notion, Professor Charlotte, if you all don't know her, but this notion that if you're really a professional, think about it, if you're a physician, a rapist or an alleged rapist comes in, your job is to save their lives. Let the criminal justice system deal with the consequences of what they've done. You can't decide, I'm not going to pull this bullet out of this person's chest. It's just not your call. Like the Hippocratic Oath makes real clear what your job is, and you should do your job. And I tell people, we have a job to bring good policy, workplace policy. And that's just a cultural statement. And we have had people quit, and we've had to fire some people because they're not aligned with our culture. And I say, now, if you want to work for an advocacy organization, those jobs exist. That's just not what we are. So cultural clarity will get you a long way.
I love those points. I mean, to your point, Johnny, I always say, no matter what change of election we have, Republican or Democrat, I want Drake to win. I want Drake to be in the next administration, right? And to your point, I always think about leadership and delegation. I always talk, when I talk to faculty and staff, I always say, you don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. It's illogical, it's not motivating. You hire smart people and they should give you recommendations and guidance, right? And when I understood that was transformational for me as a leader. So thank you so much for mentioning that. Other questions?
Can I just say one thing in response to that? It's just because I feel like I saw some eyes when I said fire. I had a working title of a book called Fire After Yourself. Today that's inspirational. But no, but it is really important. I didn't mean that I didn't mean to be harsh about it because taking someone's livelihood away from them is a serious matter. And so we call it red carpet in, red carpet out. So always dignity and respect. There's 0 point to having people who are in an organization who are not aligned. You can't build a team if you have people working against you and in ways that are not aligned with the culture that she wants to create for her 400 plus employees. So I just didn't want to walk away and say I'm making light of it. But at the end of the day, you as a leader have to say, this is where we're going. And people are going to come with you. You have to create an environment where people can challenge it. So we have a challenge culture. We call it challenge, decide, and then commit. And so I'm opening the environment up to challenge ideas because that is where diversity shows up and really makes us better. And then a decision will be made, and then you have to commit or not. And if you don't commit the right way, I'll make the decision for you.
Questions?
I am.
Say your name and
Oh, sorry.
and where you're
Natalie,
from.
I'm a Creole. I'm from around the line, Wisconsin. I was just wondering if you could give us who are going into our first job at law school any advice on how to set ourselves up for a career later. Because it sounds like you started off not even started off as a prosecutor and now you're with an Erica. How vastly different. How do we set ourselves up?
Well, I started in a law firm. So probably a lot of you will end up at law firms. And I started my first 5 years of my career was, no, actually I started as a law clerk. I skipped my clerkships. So I clerked at the district court level and then at court of appeals level. And I had, you know this person, I clerked for Ann Claire Williams.
Oh, did you?
She is like one of my, she should have been the first Supreme Court.
Well, whatever.
That's
So,
a whole different conversation.
so I was a law clerk to her, and I will tell you that there are traditional steps, right, in terms of career progression for attorneys. When you, I would say there are two kind of buckets, right? There's the corporate progression, and then there's the more litigation based or generalist progression. I think that you can take your career in different places. You don't have to follow that exact sort of traditional progression, but I will tell you it's important, my perspective, time at a law firm is important, especially early in your career. It gives you a degree of grounding, attention to detail, the ability to understand corporate structures, even if they're smaller, that I believe set you up for success. Now, there are people on my team who started out in-house and are wildly successful. But you have to know that you're gonna have to develop the skills elsewhere, right? Because once you get to a corporate structure, there's less time to sort of teach you those fundamentals. And so it's not about a linear trajectory and having the same, you know, everyone has to do this, then that, then this. The point is you're aggregating skills at each of those rungs. And if you didn't aggregate that skill basket at a particular rung, ensure that you are thinking, and it's your job to identify them with your mentors and with your sponsors, what did you miss, right? By skipping that rung, and how are you going to supplement and complement?
Become an expert at something. That is the #1 contribution that you're gonna make. General counsels, they're made from, like, there are people who come, like, I was a labor and employment lawyer. We had 408,000 employees, so a significant amount of our practice was labor and employment. So I became one. And then I hired a securities lawyer and hired a translator, like I hired around me. But I was a subject matter expert at something. IP, transactional, whatever it is, just becomes so good at it that if you're in the firm or if you're in a department, people just, you're the go-to person. You know everything there is about that. You're the heart surgeon. That doesn't mean you don't need dermatologists and you don't need other kinds of doctors, but you're really good at what you do. I tell everyone, find one area of the law and know it better than anyone else in your organization. That will help you, I mean, literally. No, I think it just will. And you'll end up, we're going to end up and be very fluid. That's the term that the dean asked to use earlier today. Very fluid. You don't know what you're going to end up doing in this life. I mean, you really don't. I thought I'd be the CEO of Sherm. Good luck. I just did. I'm just telling you, I'm not the most empathetic leader in the world. I'm not naturally predisposed to be that guy. But look at God, as they say. I mean, serious.
Oh, that's awesome. We have time for about 2 final questions.
See question behind you.
My colleague. Yes, she was in my section right here.
Ask me, and that was my boss.
Oh my goodness.
Happy to hear it. It's been inspirational with this discussion, and you talked about your history, Sagan's Advocate University. What are some current headwinds you're experiencing in leadership and how are you adapting?
Current headwinds. She said, we talked about our careers, things acting, but you know, there's always something new. Current headwinds for my colleague.
You know, I would say it really dovetails, Krista, what we've been talking about a little bit. We are very much globally in a cultural shift around the world. And as an organization that has offices in, I don't know, 30+ countries, right? The geopolitical environment coupled with the US environment, all of it moving at the same time. Sometimes, you know, in the past, I think we've had one shift in one region, another shift in a different region, but it is full on. And so I would say, staying abreast of all of the different pivots and changes around the world, coupled with understanding the economic implications to those, because that's what, that's where we live, right? And then honestly, just as a human, trying to digest on a personal level all of these changes, that is hard. And then hopefully engaging with my family and my kids to help them sort of like process some of this at the same time, I would say that's what I'm the most focused on and worried about.
Similar, there's a term that the economists now use called polycrisis.
Yeah.
And that is, there's just, at once, we used to have every 2 or 3 years a crisis, and now all of a sudden we have 5 of them at once. And so there's a phrase that they're using called a polycrisis. And that's what we're sitting in the middle of right now. So the hardest thing for me to do is walk into my office. I can't imagine being the president of the United States. Like, there's a problem over here, there's a problem over here, there's a big problem over here at once. And there are no easy solutions to any of these problems. And they're looking now toward your people, either the citizenry or your employees or your shareholders. Everyone's looking for you to have the answer. It is overwhelming. I again, give too much information, but I went to a point where I had to like literally start taking meditation and figuring out how to sleep because I couldn't shut my brain down. I was wanting to solve problems. We just quick anecdote. We opened an office in Saudi Arabia, and so Riyadh, and we have an initiative speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have this program called the People Manager Qualification, and in the program we tackled the issues facing the LGBTQ plus community. We know how that went over in Saudi Arabia, and let me tell you, it was really tough because we had the prospects of a $25 million initial grant from the government. And they said, but not with that product looking that way. You've got to introduce this in another way. And we're like, yeah, but our values are, we embrace diversity, da, 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 da. So literally, it was a crisis at the moment. What do I do? And your employees were all looking to say, okay, I know what he said, but let's see what he does in practice. Those moments where ethics, you're confronted with them. And I would just say that's the problem, is there's no easy answer in this very diverse and flat world. There's just problems everywhere.
Last question.
So I've got one. Raji Harris, I'm from Principal Financial Group in the Real Estate Division.
He left the law department.
He was promoted.
Keep an open mind about opportunities. So I'm a big believer in that success leaves. And success leaves clues. Both have had remarkably successful careers, both gone in different directions. We've talked a little bit about some of the things that have helped you get there, empathy, et cetera. But I'm curious, what's 1 or 2 things that, as you kind of think about your career, kind of taking a step back, that have really been instrumental in whether it's your approach, your mindset to helping you get to where you are now and continue to succeed in your careers?
So it's mentoring and being mentored. That is the secret of every successful failure, period. I spend more of my time mentoring today than I do probably practicing law. And I have been mentored by the best, some of the best legal minds, and the best humans. Right? So, and the only thing that they required was they don't mentor people that don't mentor, right? So, it's time consuming, right? And you're getting calls from, especially right now, with people leaving government and leading that moment because they're in a crisis themselves, and they had a job, now they don't have a job, and both of Dan and I know a lot of people in Washington and in different roles all over the government. So I would say, if you're in law school and you're not mentoring anyone, you're not developing the skill set you need to be mentored, right? And when you're in law school, you often think like, I need help. People need to tell me, but the way that you learn how to receive information from people is when you have to try to give it to somebody else and see the crazy and annoying things they do when you're trying to help them. It changes who you are as a mentee. And I don't say this as a, like, this is not one of those nice few things you say at, you know, a panel. I'm serious. Like, your legal career will be dependent on your network and the degree to which people give a damn about helping you. Period. So if you can demonstrate that you give a damn about helping other people, you attract that kind of person to you. Right? And if you demonstrate that you don't give a damn about other people, you attract that kind of person to you too. And it makes for a very different experience in the profession because I'm from New York. New York has two worlds, and not everybody's into mentoring and not everybody's into supporting everybody. So, and I'll tell you, you walk into a room and you know the room you've walked into. If you walked into one of those rooms where it's those they lift people up, they have that good vibe. It feels different. The problems don't feel intractable. You feel emboldened and confident. When you walk into one of those other rooms with the sharp elbows and the what's in it for me and the let's talk about myself, man, the problems seem heavy. It's hard to figure things out. How do you find allies? How do I support? I can't. So I'm not joking when I tell you that's the secret to success.
And agree a whole bunch, right? Find your career sweet spot. And I've found that the sweet spot to me is where, if you look at the concentric backgrounds, the circles, where you find something that you're really, really good at and can become great at. You find something that you like to do, that you're passionate about or can be passionate about, and something that people will pay you to do. That's the sweet spot, is right in the middle. And for people who overcorrect one of those three, you're in a life of misery. You're going to go for something and do a job that pays you a lot of money that you hate. You're going to do something that you're really passionate about that no one will pay you to do. That's real bad, especially after law school debt. Ooh, Dean, ooh, that was ugly. Or you do something that you can't be great at. I mean, you gotta find that thing. So I tell people that's the real secret to my success and my whatever success is meant for me, is I'm living in that sweet spot where I'm pretty damn good at what I do. People will pay me well to do it. And I actually like doing it. That when you do that, you are in the sweetest spot forever, because you gotta work and might as well do it in that sweet spot.
Johnny, Natalie, this was extraordinary. Thank you so much for your. Thank you so much for your candor, for your courage, for your leadership. I always believe that we live a life where we get other seeds to grow and to blossom. Today, you've planted some seeds. We've got some future lawyers and advocates and leaders in this room that you have inspired. Thank you so much. I'll see you all at the reception. Thank you all for coming out.
You were great, Mom.